Alright, it is time to talk about a Spider-Man game that should have been a DLC for a Spider-Man game. So while everyone else was freaking out about the PS5, I tepidly walked in with Miles Morales like... I'm going to throw up a spoiler warning later in the video when I get into the more detailed shit. To start things off, I want to talk about the obvious things that I and everybody else liked. The web slinging is at the top of its game. Swinging through New York City in the game already felt pretty amazing, but having it not be a copy-paste of Peter's style shows how in-depth the game designers went into creating a newer experience. Not to mention, it was just a genius move to set the game during Christmas time in New York. I can't think of a better time for a Spider-Man game to take place. And what's probably my favorite thing about the game is that once you beat it, you can change the time of day. So I've logged probably countless hours just swinging through a city-lit, snowy New York night. The fighting mechanics are as smooth as ever, and using Miles to introduce the Venom Strike takedowns is what made the combat infinitely more unpredictable. The score and soundtrack make the game feel alive, especially the way it kicks off when you start swinging. I really enjoyed Miles's relationship with his friend Ginky. Their sense of humor around the Spider-Man stuff introduced immature levity that only high school students who are playing Vigilante could have. Okay, I've got to talk about it because everyone else is talking about it. The new Peter design. Listen, objectively, it's obviously better. The skin is textured, the hair looks fuller. It overall looks like a more real person than the last design. But why would you ever change the face of a character that people spent dozens of hours becoming emotionally connected with? You put in all this time and effort into humanizing a digital model as best as anyone ever has in a game. The player spends hours and hours and hours going through highs and lows with this version of the character. Not to mention, it de-ages the character of Peter significantly. I shouldn't be looking at Peter and Miles and thinking that they're both blowing off Christmas break homework assignments. His face is covered most of the game anyway. True, but that's obviously not when it matters. When I'm swinging around, I don't care who it is under the mask. I don't care if it's the old one or the new one or Gordon fucking Ramsay. When it does matter is when I'm watching Pete let Aunt May die because he realizes it means everyone else in New York can live. And sure, maybe after another 25 hours, I'll get used to the new design, but I don't think I'll ever be able to look at this and feel the same way as when I looked at this. Another thing that bugged me was they filled the game with so many pointless, annoying fetch quests. This was the result of having very little amount of actual story gameplay. Stuffing the map with time capsules, postcards, underground caches, sound samples, and training challenges divides the gameplay into really fun stuff that I want to do for the rest of my life and homework. I mean, the only reason I tolerated the backpack shit in the first one was because it showed a cool, unique insight into Peter's life as Spider-Man with things that I actually knew about. I couldn't care less about what Miles and Finn hid in a bunch of time capsules. By the way, that's not how time capsules work. You're supposed to put everything in one box, not 1 in 30. Alright, that's it. That's all the spoiler-free shit. That's the basics you need for if you haven't played this yet and you're deciding to still play it. From now on, spoilers, you've been warned, bitch. I fucking love the start of this game. It's way more exhilarating than the first one. It packs a great emotional punch, like, immediately by having Miles face Rhino alone while Peter's passed out. And it was just a badass way to introduce the bioelectricity. Where I think the narrative is at its weakest is that it relies on this overused theme for Spider-Man movies and games that someone close to Spider-Man is doing the wrong things for the right reasons because there's an actual villain or something. I mean, why wouldn't you use new or fresher themes for Miles as Spider-Man? There's already this great underlying thing throughout where Miles is adapting to his new home in Harlem as Miles and Spider-Man, so why not dive deeper into that rather than just reusing an already boring Spider-Man concept? Simon Krieger, blandest villain ever. Making him just another money-hungry tech bad guy takes out any complexity whatsoever. I mean, what a fucking waste of Troy Baker. Roxxon, New Form, The Underground, they all sound like one of a million stock examples if you Googled evil money-hungry company, bad energy source, and anarchist group. It's obvious that they just threw anything together to fit this extremely basic template. And finally, what I think suffers most from this overused bland plot, the Tinkerer. I can't begin to describe how infuriating it was to play to the end of this game and watch this character be so nonsensical throughout. Finn's descent into evil was not as motivated as they tried to make it, and honestly was just super distracting. I mean, yeah, the death of a loved one is often the driving point for when they make a revenge character like this, but they didn't build her character as that kind of person. I mean, she's not evil. She doesn't go, like, crazy over the course of the game. It's not like her underground technology messed with her judgment the way that the neural interface messed with Doc Ock's. It just seemed so forced and unreasonable, especially the end when Miles is telling her to stop or else all of Harlem will explode. Why the fuck would he lie about that? So he lies once about being Spider-Man in their entire friendship, and now she doesn't trust anything he says. It looks like they were looking for anything to trip that wire, which is why her immediate switch to realizing the error of her ways and then her sacrifice really didn't mean anything for me, except for having me scream at my TV. It didn't have to go down this way. If the writers were just creative a little bit, they could have found an interesting, complex way to build this character. The only saving grace about the ending of this game that I actually really, really loved was when some of the Harlem residents saw Miles without his mask on. Them remarking on about how he's just a kid reminded me of the train scene in Spider-Man 2. And it brought up that, you know, that concept of the people of the neighborhood you are risking your life to defend, keeping your secret. That's just that's a Spider-Man thing, man. That felt like fucking Spider-Man. The sense of community, especially with Miles and his new home in Harlem, it garnered so much more emotional impact than anything involving Finn, personally. Overall, the perfected web slinging and fight mechanics just weren't enough to make me forget about the complete lack of effort into the story of this game. I mean, if you just trim the fat, if you get rid of some of the unnecessary elements, you can add it onto Spider-Man PS4 as a DLC. However, I do think that there is potential for the character of Miles to have his own game, like his actual own game, that doesn't take 10 hours to finish and doesn't feel like a hand-me-down game of Peter's. Those are pretty much my thoughts. Comment below what you liked about the game, what you didn't like, what frustrated you, and what you loved about it. And I'll see you guys next time.